Good afternoon, all. Welcome to January's speaker series. It's so great seeing everyone this afternoon. For those of you that have not attended in the past, Dirigo Labs Speaker Series is a monthly event where founders and leaders share advice on how they overcame challenges, capitalized on their target market, and developed their product, providing you with actionable insight for your own products and processes. For more information, you can visit us on Facebook or online at centralmaine.org under our Speaker Series tab. I'd like to thank our sponsors for this afternoon's conversation. This free event is presented by Dirigo Labs and is sponsored by CGI, Valley Beverage, Thomas College's Harold Alphon Institute for Business Innovation, and Bricks Co-working and Innovation Space. In addition, I'd like to say hello to folks watching remotely at home or from their office. This conversation is being streamed live and will be available for later viewing on our YouTube channel. This afternoon's conversation is presented by Looma with Trevor Ruggiero, founder of Looma LLC. In this speaker series, Trevor will discuss how Looma is going beyond design and critical component manufacturing to offer a complete service that takes your product from concept to pilot production. For those not familiar with Looma, Looma LLC is a life science product development company that blends disciplined engineering with craftsmanship, empowering companies to create prototypes and products that work efficiently and effectively. And with that, I will hand it over to Trevor. Trevor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great. Thank you, Sabrina, and the rest of the team. I appreciate you having me here, and thanks to the rest of you for joining this talk. So let's see if I can share my screen here. All right. Great. Yeah. So the format that was proposed to me for this talk was a sort of a how I built this talk. We're still very early. We've made some progress. We've built something, but we're very much still in the process of building. So I wanted to format it into a how we got to where we are today, give some of my background, and then talk about what Looma's doing today, and then finally where we're going, because we're, as I said, we're very early stage, and we have big plans for the future, and how we can be part of Maine's growing tech ecosystem here. So as we go through these sections, I'll pause at the end of each one of them and give folks a chance to ask any questions that they might have. So how we got here, my background. So I went to Northeastern University, trained as a mechanical engineer. And one of the great benefits of Northeastern is their co-op program. So as part of my education, I got to work at 3 different companies, and that was a really valuable experience in discovering what it was I actually wanted to do with my career, and see what the day-to-day job actually looks like in some of these different companies. The final company that I did my co-op with was a company called Fixed Product Development, and they were nice enough to hire me after my undergrad degree. As part of being hired by Fixed, I also went back to Northeastern and got my master's in electrical engineering through their Gordon Engineering Leadership Program. Going to Fixed, they are also a consulting company. And I really couldn't have asked for a better starting experience because, over my 10-year career there, I worked with one company, had the pleasure of getting to know my colleagues really well and build strong relationships. But I also got to work with dozens of companies. So as you can see here, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a few of the companies that I got to work with over those 10 years. But it was an amazing experience because instead of just working for one startup, I got to work for all these different startups and still play an integral role in their teams, and watch them build their team and their technology and become successful. So it was really a great way to start my career and sort of open my eyes up to the world of entrepreneurship and all the ways in which it can be manifested. So the idea that came out of my 10 years at Fixed, that led to Looma and me moving to Maine, were a couple of combining factors. One was, I saw a need within the life science industry for access to better tools. When you're building life science products, you often need the right materials and even processes very early on, even in the prototyping stages, right? If you're designing a diagnostic device that requires an optically clear, COP window with no autofluorescence, there's really no way to do that other than to injection mold COP, and you even have to injection mold it the right way, right, to not get contaminants that lead to autofluorescence. So in my career, we're constantly struggling with this because we were trying to take what is normally a low-cost, high-volume product or procedure, and we were trying to apply it to the prototyping world, which can be high cost but very low volume. So there's always this constant conflict when we're trying to get prototypes built with production processes. In Maine, I saw the potential to solve this because coming from the Boston area, it's a much more affordable cost of living, and you can get space up here that could facilitate manufacturing. So it started to make that idea of incorporating manufacturing quality tools and processes into the early development phases. Maine was still very close to my existing network in Boston. There was a lot of great initiatives in here in Maine to bring technology to the state. Talk to the folks at Maine & Co. They were very helpful in getting me set up here, and then all the other great organizations that are trying to really establish Maine's dominance in the technology sector. And then it's also a desirable place to be for both myself and future talent. So all those factors combined, and then wanting to move my family to Maine for personal reasons, kind of led to this idea of starting Looma. So you can see down here on the bottom, right? This is I Googled traffic in Boston, and this is one of the first images that popped up. And I used to live in Somerville, so my exit is literally like 2 more down 93 from where this picture is taken. So this isn't an exaggeration. This is really the life I had and was hoping to get away from for I think all the reasons that many of us are here in Maine, which is the great outdoors. So that led to Looma being born. Prior to this, I technically started Looma the very first day where I worked for myself, was June of 2020. Prior to that, it was about a 2-year process of talking with my old employer and working out a partnership with them to start Looma. And then obviously, as you're all aware, there was a pandemic that hit. So it was quite an eventful beginning to 2022, or 2020 rather. My daughter was born in February. The whole country locked down in March. We then tried to move ourselves to Maine all by ourselves without movers or anything in May, and then started Looma in June. When I started Looma, I was mostly working from my house. Our offices looked like the image that you see here on the left up above. So, totally empty. There's kind of some nice symbology there, because I found early on in starting Looma that you really have nothing but an idea, right? Sort of like this space was just an open space. So it's like, yeah, could be, there's the idea that it could be an office and a manufacturing space, but there's nothing there. And to bring people along with you and get them on board and convince them that there's something to your idea, you have to turn it into a vision, really. So you need to take this empty space and you need to be able to fill in all the details so that people can follow along and see your vision. So as I said, there was really this nice symbology to sort of building the vision for my company, for Looma, as I was sort of building out the space, and they kind of required the same skill sets in a way. In October of 2020, I brought on a partner. If you're starting your own company, I highly recommend it. just having someone there to just, shoulder the burden with you and bounce ideas off of is immensely helpful. As you can see, we started to build out our offices. This is the, get through the winter with small children phase, where we populated the downstairs with bouncy houses and various ways to exhaust my two small children. At this point, when I brought on so day one, we just had one client, which was my previous employer that I worked out a partnership with. We brought on my partner, we had two clients. By February of 2021, we were up to 4 clients, and we're ready to make our first full-time hire. So you can see the image here. The office space was really coming along, but entirely empty. 2 desks on opposite sides of the space. These were pre-vaccinations. Everyone's still social distancing and all that. In June, we bought our first, serious piece of equipment, got a CNC as well as a laser cutter and a few other tools. By October, we were up to 10 clients, and we hired a second full-time engineer. Let me see if I can move the faces out of the way here. And then, that brings us to January of 2022, where we are now. We're up to, 14 clients, not all currently active, but 14 clients that we've had projects with and have worked with. And yeah, you can see that our space has come a long ways from June of 2020 to where we are today. So I'll stop there and see if anyone has any questions on my background or consulting or sort of the timeline for Looma so far. In the next section, I'll get into more of what we're currently doing today at Looma.
Trevor, great overview so far. Thank you. With regards to, in particular, this slide and thinking about kind of you're spinning up an office and then subsequently needing to hire during COVID, were you able to kind of surf that proverbial wave of the Great Resignation in terms of taking advantage of the workforce wanting maybe more mobility and flexibility, or was it quite challenging? So what was your experience in the hiring process during what was a challenging economic time for many?
Right. Yeah, good question. So my theory before moving to Maine was that it would not be hard to find talent because people want to move to Maine. I know a lot of people in the Boston area that when I tell them what I'm doing, they're like, "Oh, I'm so jealous. I'd love to move to Maine." So when we went to do our first hire, that proved to be true. We really did not struggle in finding talent. Our first hire was through Northeastern, so it helps to have the Northeastern network, which is quite strong in New England, I think. But we definitely haven't seen any of the impacts of this Great Resignation, and really I think there's a lot of different terms for what's going on, right? The Great Resignation. I've also heard the Great renegotiation, and I think that what's driving that is this imbalance between employer and employees. And what we've tried to do at Looma is, be very sensitive to that and make a lifestyle part of our pitch. So a lot of people are coming to Maine because they want the lifestyle living in Maine, and so we try to facilitate that. We never ask our employees to work more than 40 hours a week, right? We make it very easy to work from home and remotely if they need to. And so I think that, the combination of, being in Maine, being sensitive to, the needs of employees and the way that past employers haven't met those, it's made it quite easy to hire.
Awesome. Thank you. And office looks great, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
Trevor, really incredible to see where Looma has come so far, especially right at the beginning of a pandemic. Congratulations to you and your team.
Thank you.
My question is pretty simple. So bringing on a partner, what would you recommend to startups and founders who are looking to go through a similar process, who are looking to find the right partner? What would you say are good characteristics to have and is important to maintaining your company?
Right. Yeah, definitely. That was an interesting process. My partner, John Walton, I started talking to him probably 10 months before, he came on board full time. So it wasn't like let me go interview 10 candidates and, 2 weeks later, we'll make a decision. It really is, you almost have to treat it more like well, I guess like finding a life partner, right? Like you date and you get to know them and you slowly build up that relationship. And I think finding a business partner is very much the same strategy to a certain extent. You need to be compatible because otherwise the relationship doesn't work. But I think it's also important to look for those differences early on, because bringing on a partner that just mirrors your skill set is not nearly as valuable as bringing on a partner that adds new skills, and you can kind of diversify which aspects of the business you each take on.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. Trevor, great presentation.
Thank you.
Can you just talk a little bit about your process of clients, how you secure your clients with you? I think it's probably maybe is it atypical from other businesses? Is it all word of mouth? Is it referral? Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yes, definitely. That is always top of mind because so far that's what makes our business run. We have some ideas for expanding it, but we can only grow. There's two things that limit our growth. One is people looking for our help, and the other one is people to help us in hiring. So I tried a lot of things early on. I tried cold calling, reaching out to folks on LinkedIn that looked like they'd be a great fit. Going through organizations that existed in Maine and trying to work my way into those organizations and become a part of those communities. And then last of all, word of mouth and reaching out to my existing network. Cold calling and messaging people on LinkedIn is entirely fruitless. If anyone's going down that route, I don't recommend it. It really did not work out for me. What's worked best is really word of mouth, and just using my existing network and checking in, reminding folks that I'm here, and just reaching out through my existing network to try to find folks that needed help. There were some cases where reaching out to the communities in Maine did work. So one case was I was able to get in touch with Todd Keeler, who works with in the tech transfer office at the Maine Innovation Center, which is part of Maine Health. And that was a great relationship to form. And off of that, we've done, I think, maybe like three projects with various folks out of Maine Medical Center. So that is another technique that worked, is trying to find those communities, those little pockets of innovation initiatives that exist, and try to work your way into them.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. All right, I'll move on to the next section unless there's any other questions. All right, so where we are today. So you'll notice a change in format of the slides. This is getting into our more polished deck that I reused, that we often use to kind of introduce ourselves, but it speaks well to what we're doing today. So our sales pitch, our elevator pitch, is that we basically bring highly talented engineers together with production quality tools to offer an unparalleled service that is broader than what your average consulting company offers, is faster because we're bringing the correct tools in early in the process, so you don't design something using prototype methods and then you have to redesign it once you go to manufacturing methods, because the end product is different once you do that. And then move faster so you get to market faster. And we can also help once they're in the getting to market phase, because we have those capabilities to support pilot builds and a lot of the engineering efforts that go into new product introduction. So that's what we do. The way we do it, our capabilities are listed here. We try to be very honest about our capabilities. I've gotten some feedback that oh, maybe don't show the areas where you're not as strong. But product development today, and especially in the life sciences, requires a huge skill set. And I don't know of anyone that really has that entire skill set under one roof. So what we like to show is, okay, these are the things that we feel we can do really well. These are the things that we know folks in the industry, and we have people in our network that can help. And then these are areas that we often rely on the client, or we don't necessarily have expertise in. So we're mostly mechanical engineers. You can see most of our capabilities are tuned to mechanical engineering. That goes beyond what you'd get in a traditional mechanical engineering curriculum. So we do a lot of systems work, automation, mechatronics. We go into material science, fluid dynamics, done a lot of work with microfluidics and millifluidics, and even getting into some of the biology and chemistry that are involved in health science and diagnostic products. We even go into some electronics, computer science, and optics. We've designed the illumination pathways for various instruments. If it gets into the hardcore optics, that's when you talk to someone like Dan Gray, who gave a talk on here previously. But we at least understand enough to do the basics, and most importantly is to be able to interface with other experts in those fields, so there's no loss of information on those communication lines. And so that initial idea that I proposed of adding manufacturing capability in a consulting environment is it's a hard message to get across. Early on, we talked to a lot of folks, and they couldn't kind of hold both things together, right? It's like you tell them a little bit about it, and they say, "Oh, great! So you're design, you're a design house. You do design, and then who would you use as a contract manufacturer?" It's like, well, the whole idea is we can do some of that in-house, so we don't necessarily need the contract manufacturer right away. Ultimately, we would want one, but early on, we can do some of that ourselves. And so then they'd switch over, and they're like, okay, so you're a manufacturer, so you have to function like a manufacturer, and how do you amortize your tools and all this. And so it's really hard to kind of get this across, this concept. And we came up with this idea of Design Plus to try to help communicate this idea a little bit better. So it's that idea that our core capability is the design. We're rooted in design, but we go beyond the design. There's that plus piece. So it's design plus the ability to injection mold or CNC the parts, and that really those two things need to be integrated and married together in order to move quickly and learn what it is you need to learn. And I think there's a strong argument for well, you're basically becoming a manufacturer, but that's not your area of expertise. Why wouldn't you go to injection molding house, or why wouldn't you go to a CNC house where that's all they do, and they can just make these parts for you? And it's, we're still working on kind of formulating our message to get past that argument. But I think the quick answer is that you lose something doing that. The technology companies in the United States used to be extremely vertically integrated. They would do, everything in-house, right? You'd have the engineering upstairs, the manufacturing downstairs. And we've done so much outsourcing and dividing everything up into its little niche that there's just so much loss at all those communication barriers. And it can actually take longer to accomplish what you want, even though you supposedly have everyone who's the expert at what they do, right? So having the ability to design something upstairs, the engineer, prints out their drawing, they go down to the CNC downstairs and they make their part just the way they want it, right? They know what's important, they know which tolerances need to be hit, and they can adapt to any issues that come up because they're the ones who designed the part. They have that core knowledge to know how to adapt. That experience then feeds back into the design because there's no way to learn how to design for CNC processes better than going and running a CNC yourself and understanding where the pain points are and where the difficulties are, right? So it's sort of this self-reinforcing process that I think has been lost, and we're hoping to bring back. So going into some of the work that we do, I have two clients to kind of highlight to give you an idea of what it is we're actually doing. So this is a company called Site Diagnostics that we continue to work with. We work with them in partnership of my old employer. So they're a client of my old employer that we've continued to service through Looma. And I've been working with them, first through Fix for about 5 years, and now 2 more years through Looma, or 1.5 more years through Looma. So some of you may have heard of a company called Theranos that's been in the news a little bit. They SiteDX is essentially trying to accomplish a similar idea as Theranos, but they're doing it through hardcore science and limiting what they say they can do, and because of that, they've actually been able to deliver. So 2 drops of blood, you can go to a doctor's office or a point of care type site, and with just those 2 drops of blood, they can do a complete blood count, which is one of the most common blood tests that's done. If you go to your doctor's visits and they draw blood, they send it out to the lab, they're most likely sending it out to have a complete blood count done. But you don't get that information back for a couple of days, and then you have to follow up with your doctor and get the results. With this, they can have the results in 20 minutes or 15 minutes even, I think, and then talk with you right there in the office if anything needs to be addressed. So the Site Diagnostic brought the computer vision and software expertise, and we help them with the mechanical side on both the analyzer and their consumable to be able to accomplish their goal. The analyzer that you see on the left here is essentially a fluorescent microscope that has an XY stage, so you can scan their cartridge. And then the cartridge that you see here on the right is a very simple injection molded stack up that's essentially replicating a microscope slide to a certain degree. So by scanning this slide with their fluorescent microscope and using computer vision, as I mentioned, and deep learning algorithms, they're able to identify all the components of the blood and report that out. So as I said, we were responsible for most of the mechanical design of this, and this is a project that is very near and dear to my heart because I was working on it for a long time. When I started with them, they were 4 or 5 people. I think they're now well over well over 200 with offices in, you know, most continents at this point. They have an FDA cleared test, and they've raised, I think, somewhere around $130 million at this point. So it's really exciting to be a part of that journey. Another client that we're working with currently is Vistapath Biosystems. So you'll notice a theme here. They are also capitalizing on the computer vision wave that is going through technology. But what they're trying to do is automate the intake process in pathology labs. So if you have a concerning mole, or you know, you've had a CAT scan or an MRI, or you have an organ that has some concerning spots, the next step is usually some sort of biopsy. Those biopsies are performed by a physician, and then they usually all go to a central lab. And as has been described to me, is they basically, you know, come in a big trash bag with, like, you know, 150 of these, and you know, this poor technician has to sort through all of them, categorize them, take down all the information that's, you know, handwritten on the vials, and then organize them into the downstream processes of tissue prep prior to going onto a microscope slide and being diagnosed by a pathologist. So the way they're doing that is they've designed this system that you can see here. It has two parts. The instrument on the left is basically a work surface with cameras in that head, and the component on the right side is essentially a touchscreen computer module that has their dashboard and presents all the information. So they take these vials that I mentioned that come in the trash bags, they put them in this circular recess here. Overhead cameras, as well as barcode readers in the mat, identify the samples, the number of samples, and, you know, any information that's on that vial. The downstream process all use standardized cassettes. Those standardized cassettes fit into these rectangular indents that you can see on the mat. There are, you know, additional, you know, vision components in that region that further characterize the samples. So the technician removes the sample after the vial has been fully characterized. They remove the samples, place them in the cassette, and the cameras will then pick up the number of samples, the color, the size, basically all the physical characteristics of those samples. That's all automatically recorded and goes into the dashboard that's presented on their tablet, and that's connected to a central lab system where, you know, a manager can track all the cases going through the lab. So it really it takes a lot of the burden off of the tech, and reduces errors, because as you can imagine, you know, if you've had a procedure where they're, you know, biopsying their liver, you probably don't really want to go through that again, because, you know, a technician swapped out the vials and didn't notice, and so that sample wasn't properly tracked to your patient ID. So, you know, error detection is a huge premium in these labs because they're very valuable samples. So that's it on sort of what we're doing today, and, you know, some of the clients we work for. Again, I'll take a break here and see if anyone has any questions on this.
I do have a question. Thanks. This is really interesting. I'm wondering how you handle your intellectual property between you and your clients, because it seems like it could be developed on both sides. Do you share it? Does one person own it? Okay. Yeah, that's a great question.
We have a standard contract with all of our clients that assigns our IP to them. So any work we do for them, they own it, and they own the intellectual property to it. It's needed to build a productive relationship in our world, right? That said, it is segmented somewhat to their field of work, and we do have a clause about you know, Looma IP and know-how, right? So we kind of say, like, okay, if we've developed these processes for silicone molding with 3D printed tools, right? So we can use that knowledge and that know-how that we've gained on your project, but you don't necessarily know that because that's sort of internal know-how that we've built up, you know, over the years. Or if we, you know, have learned you know, something about optics or illumination, right? Then, like for example, for this product, we designed the illumination pathways. You know, they can't necessarily prevent us from designing the illumination pathway on, you know, another client's product. But if it was a client who was doing, you know, tissue grossing in pathology labs, then they could say, hey, you need to not work for them because they are a direct competitor of us.
Following
but-
on, oh, I'm
sorry.
sorry.
I was just going to say that, yeah, like, you know, for example, for SiteDX, I think I'm on, you know, like 3 of their patents. So we definitely, you know, they own all that technology that I developed.
Oh, great. I was just going to follow on to Emily's great question and just ask, do you guys white label anything? Do you have like on the shelf technology, so to speak? Or is everything always as you just described?
So for the most part, we don't develop our own. So you're saying, like, do we have IP that we might license? We haven't done that yet, but I think that is an area that we're interested in, and I'll get into that a little bit and kind of where we're going. One of the advantages I see of being in this space and having the manufacturing know-how is that there are a lot of common pain points that that clients would love to have solved and is not integral to their IP or their offering. And so if we can kind of recognize those common pain points and we can come up with solutions to them, I think that'd be a great opportunity to sort of do what you're talking about. Just for example, like, you know, fluid handling and storage. Every diagnostic project that I've worked on, that's a major problem, right? So that's an area where we have some ideas and we're working to, you know, develop our own intellectual property on the side so that if a client comes to us, we could say, hey, you know, every diagnostic company struggles with how to make their fluids, you know, how to store them and make them shelf stable and then introduce them to their assay when the time comes. Like, we have this way of doing it, you know, would you like to license it?
Trevor, thank you for this. I'm curious a little bit, going back to, you mentioned vertically integrating and the design plus,
Yeah.
which is so important, right? But based on being, I would love to just kind of hear your benchmarks or milestones or kind of measures of success that made you comfortable to go out there and have capital expenditures on what were, I'm assuming, you know, not inexpensive pieces of equipment at such an early age, and have those kind of CapEx things hit your startup. What was that like?
Yeah. We're very much in the middle of that. So we've invested in some equipment, but we haven't really you know, gone for the big purchases yet. So CNC was pretty big for us, but you know, we have been opportunistic and bought a lot of equipment used when it kind of came online, became available. So there's a couple of things that have allowed us to take some risks to test this idea and see if it actually holds water. One of them is being in Maine. We have extremely low overhead compared to, you know, all of our counterparts in Boston that are paying unbelievable rents to, you know, have spaces that don't even support, you know, manufacturing. So for a very reasonable, you know, price, we're able to get a facility that has, you know, 3-phase power, high bay garage door, a lot of the components that you need to get these machines in house and get them running. So, you know, so that's one thing that's allowed us to kind of test the waters there. The other is, you know, interest. When we pitch this ideas to some folks, as I mentioned earlier, it's often met with resistance of, well, why don't you just have the manufacturing, you know, you're the design professional, get the manufacturing professionals. But there's some people that have lived this life and they totally get it. And you tell them about this and they're like, oh, like, let us know. You know, I have 4 or 5 people now that have said, let me know when you get an injection molding machine, because you know we'll be right there in line to use your services. So it's a big risk, as you brought up. I'm sure that's why you're asking the question. And to manage that risk, we're trying to be opportunistic and get equipment as cheaply as we can, and for some of the bigger purchases, build up some demand before we really spring for it.
That's wonderful. Really impressive. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions before I move on to where we're going? All right. So as you've seen, a lot of the beginning of this presentation is really geared towards consulting. But we don't want to pigeonhole ourselves in the consulting category. We almost think of ourselves more as a product-based company, because I think we can, you know, we can facilitate the growth that a product-based company offers. And the product for us is really our process, right? It's all these things I've talked about. It's having the creative engineers, having that top talent to solve these challenges. It's having the tools so that they can, you know, they can go downstairs and try out their ideas and really prove it, right? There's a lot of folks that have, you know, they're brilliant engineers and they have great ideas, but those ideas are you know, left in the filing cabinet because they can't go downstairs and prove it out, and someone else thinks, this probably won't work, right? But if you actually have those tools, you can go downstairs, you could try it, and you can actually show that it works or not, then it'll allow more ideas to flourish that would have been filed away. And then having that you know, analytical analysis as well, right? It's that feedback loop of, okay, I had the idea, I was able to build it, these were the results, now I can go iterate, I can start on this loop again. And that's really how you move quickly and make progress, and the only way to really solve these hard problems that no one else has solved before. And the reason that I like to think of Looma as more of a product-based company and as our process being the product is because I think this opens up new worlds beyond consulting. So there's the client work pathway, which we've already proven out, and that's most of what I presented here, where we take client work, we put it through this process that we're trying to build, the Looma process, and the output is, you know, a happy client because we're able to get a working product, you know, to the market for them faster than anybody else could. I think there's a lot of other feeders into this process. So one is the development of internal IP. I mentioned earlier this idea of developing some IP around fluid storage. So that's one area that, you know, we're working on. But I think as we grow and we have more tools and capability, there's more common industry pain points that we'll identify and can section off some of our own resources to try to come up with solutions to. The output of that work could be, you know, licensing of IP, or if it's a good enough idea, maybe we even spin it out as its own company. We're also starting to look into, and we're very interested in, you know, the SBIR and you know, getting government grants, going that route. There's a lot of grants out there for, you know, if you can come up with, you know, a diagnostic for, you know, a point of care diagnostic for hepatitis B. I saw one the other day, right? Or you can, you know, solve this other challenge in the life science industry. So I think this is another area that we'd like to focus on and look into, you know, winning some of those grants to fund, you know, internal research and internal work that again could go to, you know, licensing of IP or spin out companies. And then the final one, and it's kind of goes hand in hand with the SBIR route, is, you know, partnering with universities and hospitals and other folks like that. We have a lot of expertise in mechanical, you know, design and fluidics and manufacturing and all that, but we're not scientists. We don't know how to develop an assay. And that's where I think, if we can partner with some of the labs and that do have scientists that are working on these problems but don't know how to turn them into a product, that could be a very fruitful relationship. Again, using that Looma process, that could also result in licensing of IP, spin out companies, or even client work, right? Maybe some of those labs, they start the company and we just work for them as a consultant. But we could still have that early relationship with the labs that could be helpful, because again, it's that the element of convenience there, right? It's like if you already have the relationship with the lab and they have this idea, it's very low inertia for them to have us try it out. And all the ideas that I've seen that have really taken off, that's really the way it's gone, right? Is someone had this idea, they tried it out before the board could say this won't work, and unbelievably it worked, and then a whole company was built around that idea. So that's sort of where we're headed. That's how, where I'd like to see us go, and use the consulting business that we've built as a springboard for the rest of this. So we've been able to grow organically. We haven't had to take any investment, and we've just been reinvesting in ourselves to build the capability. And so, through that, building that consulting company, I think we can now start to, invest in some of these other areas to try to turn ourselves into a larger entity than just a consulting company. So how do we do that? Number one is we got to build the team, right? Our core capability is the engineering, and it's that type of engineering that's really the hardest to do, because we're trying to solve problems that that no one solved before, bring products to market that don't exist, and so we need really creative, analytical folks that are really strong engineers. So that's one of our kind of key initiatives is how do we target those people and bring them into Looma. And I've talked a little bit about some of those pieces. Maine is definitely playing a role in that. We found that that's a great tool for attracting folks, and then trying to give people the lifestyle they want, understanding that work-life balance is important, and you need your weekends off to go skiing and have fun, so that you can show up on Monday and kind of use your best neurons to solve some of these problems. The other element is building the space. So we have some tools. I mentioned we have a CNC, we have a laser cutter, we have some thermal presses, 3D printers, but we want to go well beyond that. So I've mentioned injection molding. I think that's one of the big expenditures that hopefully is in our near future, and will greatly expand our capabilities. We also want to add downstream processing equipment. So if you're assembling a diagnostic device, you need some of these bonding and downstream processing tools to create the end assembly. So ultrasonic welding, laser welding, cold forming, all those types of things. Also precision filling and metering. We hope to build like a clean room in the future, because that's also critical for a lot of these components, is building them in very clean environments, so no contaminants are introduced during the assembly process. And then another that was unexpected to a certain extent, but has arisen, is having sheet metal fabrication capability. So this certainly isn't an exhaustive list, but it gives you an idea of how we want to build out our space and the tools and capabilities we want to add. And I think the final key has been a running theme throughout this presentation, but one of the final keys to building our company is the synergy between what we're trying to accomplish and what Maine's trying to accomplish. There's a lot of great initiatives for building the tech industry here in Maine, and we hope to be a part of that, help build that industry, and also feed off of those initiatives. So the people and culture piece, I've already talked about that, but being in Maine has already proven to be really helpful for building that strong culture that will help us attract top talent. This idea of combining engineering and manufacturing, Maine is the perfect backdrop for building that, because it has a growing life science industry, but it also has this rich history of manufacturing, and it has a great network for manufacturing. So if we can be that middle player that helps modernize some of the manufacturing to help bring it back to this country, then Maine's the perfect place to try to do that and feed off this wave of reshoring manufacturing. And for the reshoring of manufacturing to be successful, we can't just copy what they're doing overseas, because we're not going to beat them on labor. So it's going to require a big engineering effort to bring that manufacturing back. And we think that's where we can play a critical role, if we have this intimate understanding of the engineering and the design piece, as well as the manufacturing piece, because we're living and breathing it every day. And then finally, the relationships in Maine, and building those has been great. We're still close to Boston and my previous network, so that's been great. Working with folks like Maine and Co, and we've talked to MTI and some of these other institutes, and now the RU Institute up here, and building relationships with them, has really been great. And then finally, some of the hospitals and those institutions that are up here. There's strong initiatives at Maine Med for innovation that we've been trying to partner with and key into, and so I think those relationships will also be they're building those relationships here in Maine has been great, and we think that is another synergistic area where being in Maine is really aligning with where we want to go. And that's all I had. Oh, I thought that was going to be a half-hour presentation. I almost filled the whole hour.
Trevor, again, thank you. That was spectacular. Kind of maybe picking up on a last few slides in terms of the future and some of the client generation items. What geography-wise, what is your kind of addressable market today? Sounds like kind of Eastern Corridor versus tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a great question. We get clients from all over the place. So SiteDX is in Israel. We have several clients that are West Coast, and kind of middle of the country, and it's actually much more spread out than I would have expected, given the strong network that I had in Boston, and that's true for the talent that we see coming through the door as well. It's not just folks graduating from Maine universities and universities in New England. It's folks from all over. So that really doesn't seem to be, it seems like we're able to address a very, certainly countrywide clientele and workforce, as well as a almost global, clientele. I think the critical piece is more on the back end. It's, once you get to building physical things, having that local network is critical. So I think that's where we're really excited to kind of be in Maine, and use our existing network in the Northeast, is when it comes time to transfer out at the final stages of manufacturing, or partnering with other folks that have expertise in building products here in Maine.
Great, thank you. And I'll just read a question that came in from Mike. Hey, Mike, thanks for the great question for Trevor. Trevor, you mentioned that there isn't a lot of vertically integrated manufacturing capacity that is doing this work in the US, and Mike is suspecting that much of it has slipped out of the country in the past few decades. So he's asking, what again are the potential niche capacities in those areas in Maine that there might be glaring voids in? A little bit about kind of the market and the the potential and the voids in terms of maybe some offshore?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I would love to know. I would love to know the answer to that question. It's sort of key to what I'm trying to figure out, right? I'm not an economist, and I don't have a kind of big picture view of that. What I do know is just what I've seen in my day-to-day work and picked up from various clients and suppliers, and what I've seen other companies focusing on, and that's led me to believe that there are these holes and there will be this focus on reshoring manufacturing. I don't know exactly what those niches will be and what will come back. I think life science is a very safe bet. And there's already a lot of life science that has stayed here. And the big piece is the quality component. That's what really drives a lot of the manufacturing that stays in the US is the quality controls. That said, we've seen such a disruption of supply chains and other issues. And I think that's further going to drive some of the reshoring of manufacturing. I don't know enough to tell you exactly which industries will be affected most strongly by that. We're waiting with bated breath to see. And I think our strategy is to get ourselves to a point where we're in a position where we can take advantage. So when we see those opportunities spring up and we better understand what's happening, we're already in a position where we can act instead of trying to catch up once it becomes clear that opportunity exists.
Apologies to kind of dominate, but just want to speak too much here. But with regards to those supply chains, how much time are you having to right now spend with kind of peeking around up and down the supply chain with vendors or customers? Has that become an issue for you? And are you spending a lot of your time on that?
Yeah, definitely. We as an organization don't spend a huge amount of time on that. We spend some, but it's a constant stress for our clients. We had a client that had a camera that was integral to their device, and they couldn't get it, so they put in a huge purchase order for it because they were worried they weren't going to have enough to support their forecasted manufacturing. And then all of a sudden that purchase order went through, and they were sitting on a couple $100K of cameras, and it was a bit of a cash flow nightmare for them, right? So it's just such a mess, and it's hard to predict the ways in which it's affecting people. And big companies are hurt by it, but startups are even more hurt by it because they don't have the cash flow, and time is more critical for them than established companies. We definitely see the startup world getting hurt by those those supply chain issues as well. And then for us, it's still something we deal with every day. I mean, we have standard vendors that we use. So I'm not sure what the audience is here, but if any of you are engineers, I'm sure you know about McMaster or Cosina for any fluidic parts. The other day we were trying to build a prototype that used some fluidic connectors, went on Cosina, and just a whole section of their fluidic connections was just out of stock, and they didn't have them. So we had to change the whole prototype because we just couldn't get those parts. So definitely a major issue.
Thank you. All right, just pausing for a moment. If there aren't any questions, would just say again, thank you so much to Trevor and Looma. Information and contact information for Looma can be found on their website or ours. And Sabrina, would you like to take us away?
I would love to. Trevor, thank you for your insightful presentation, and to our audience for joining us this afternoon. This conversation has been recorded and will be available at a later date for viewing on our YouTube channel. Next month, Dirigo Labs will be featuring Jeffrey Bino of CGI, who will be discussing the innovation behind robotic process automation, or RPA, on Thursday, February 10th at noon. For more information on upcoming speaker series, please visit our website at centralmaine.org and click on our speaker series tabs. Thank you for everyone who joined us this afternoon, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.